Welcome to the video for drawing eyes. We are going to learn how to draw eyes realistically. We're starting out our portrait unit. So our objective for this assignment is I can accurately draw and shade the eyes using techniques I've learned in class. So the rubric for this assignment, once we are done drawing our three eyes on our practice sheet, I've got the rubric all laid out for how you're going to be graded on each thing. You're going to be graded on the structure of the eye. So we'll start with number 4, that's advanced. I use the structure of the eye to build it in my drawing by placing the eyeball first and adding details on top. If you are in the needing help category, that means you drew the eye the way that you wanted to and you did not follow the steps in the instructional video. So there's a range of different levels here. I'm not going to read every single one, but I do want to kind of go over some basics with you. The next thing you'll be graded on is basic shapes to build the eye. So we're using those skills that we learned previously about basic shapes, and this is going to help us actually build the eye in our drawing. So if we are in the proficient category, I started with basic shapes, but then focused on the details too early. My eye drawing is not as accurate as it could be. So you've got the basics down, but you jumped into details too soon. You could have used more basic shapes to build the eye a little bit better. Realistic shading is the next thing we're working on. We've already worked on values. We've worked on shading objects. So we've had lots of practice with shading. So we're going to be graded on our realistic shading of the eye. If we are advanced, I took my time to shade the eyes using a variety of values that describe the form of the eye. If I'm approaching the standard, I'm kind of getting it, but I need a little bit of help. I used 4 more values to shade the eyes. Some of the shading looks rushed and it's lacking details. So we've got a couple different values going on, but we could have done a lot better job sometimes. This is when it's looking rushed. Maybe we weren't using our time as wisely and we were just rushing to get it done. And then eyelashes. We did practice eyelashes specifically and how we build the eyelashes, what kind of pencil pressure we need. And, it takes some practice to get that down. But by the third practice drawing, we should be able to do a much better job with this. So if we're advanced in this, I used my pencil to apply appropriate pressure to get the feel of an eyelash. I varied my lines and pressure to create realistic eyelashes. If we are approaching the standard in this one, so we've mostly got it, but we need a little bit of help. I used curved lines for my eyelashes, but I did not vary the direction or length of the eyelashes to make them more realistic. So these are going to be those fake looking eyelashes that we talked about before. We're trying to avoid those. So this is how your eye drawings are going to be graded. It's broken down into these 4 parts. And this feedback is pretty specific and gives you an idea of where you stand with each one of these things. I'll put additional comments in Google Classroom if I need to. And you are always welcome to revise and resubmit if you think you can do a better job to show better mastery of the content. So good luck with your drawing. Today we're going to learn how to draw an eye. Yay, everyone loves learning how to draw eyes. This is our practice sheet for this lesson. But before we get to that, I want to kind of go over some structural things about how an eye fits within our head. So I have my little skull here. Excuse the bottom jaw, it just kind of fell off there. So we have our skull, right? This is a fake skull. This is not a real skull. But I want you to notice some things about this skull here. This is an eye socket. This is where the eye fits into the head. And this is important to know so that you understand how the eye is built, and having a better understanding of that is going to help you draw the eye better. So an eyeball, right, sits inside of this eye socket, and I don't have a ball small enough to fit in here. A ping pong ball would probably be a really good example, and it would sit inside of here. Now, on top of that eyeball and on top of these bones here is going to be some muscle, and that's going to hold the eye together. And that's going to kind of be like our eyelid. And our eyelid is kind of just a little flap of skin that sits on top of that. But since the eye is round, those things are going to sit on top of the eye, and they're going to curve around the face. So the eye is not this flat football thing that sits in here. It's muscles and skin that sit around a rounded object within this eye socket. Also, if I were to look at this, the eyes kind of sit into the head a little bit. The nose sticks out, the brow line sticks out, and the eye sits into that. Even though the eye is going to be rounded here, the nose and the brow line are still going to come out in front of the eye. So we're going to keep those things in mind as we're drawing our eye. Let me get rid of my skull here. And I will also adjust my camera so that you can see better. Let's zoom in. Let's zoom in a little bit more. There we go. We're going to start by drawing this eye here. I chose this one to start because it is very light in value. And so we can see all of the lines here to kind of get the structure of the eye down. This one here is a little bit darker in value. There's more shadows going on. And this is going to give us an eye that is a different shape and it has more depth to it. It sits in the head a little bit more. And then here we've got a set of eyes that are together within the head, and we see the nose and the brow line, and we've got the sides of the face a little bit, so we can see how the eyes sit in the head. So that's kind of why we've got these 3 different options going here. So I'm going to get my drawing pencils out. We are still using drawing pencils because they're going to give us the largest range of value while we're drawing. All right, I have a 7B that's too dark for right now. I have a 2B and I have a B. So in this packet, B is the lightest pencil. I'm going to go ahead and sharpen this pencil real quick because it was not sharpened before. All right, there we go. Cool. So when I'm drawing the eye, it is easiest if I don't just kind of jump right into it, but I kind of build the eye over here. So I can see this is kind of the beginning of that brow bone. This is that bottom portion of the bone, like the top of the cheek, and then the eye is sitting into it. So I'm going to draw the eyeball as it is actually taking up all the space on the paper. Okay. Now the eyelid and the bottom eyelid, they're sitting on top of the circle. So I'm looking on the eye. This tear duct is sitting below halfway. If I were to draw a line across here, there's my halfway line. So this is sitting below halfway on the eye. It starts outside the eye. And it's going to come up. It's going to kind of wrap around the eye. It's following the curve of the eye here. And the ends kind of on that line. Okay. I'm going to follow this around. The tear duct comes up to the eye, and then it's going to follow the shape of the eye around. So the tear duct, remember, is not on the eyeball, but it is going to come up to the eye, and then it is going to follow the shape of the eye around, and it's going to come up. Okay, so right now I've just got the very shape of the opening of the eyelid. Here I can see the edge of the eyeball. But there's the edge of the eyeball right there. The tear duct is a muscle that sits on the edge here. There's a couple different shapes in it. I may have made mine just a tad big, but that's okay. Couple more things here. I can see the depth of the skin here on this eyelid. So I'm going to make sure I draw that in. This is a line that runs right along here. That is the thickness of the skin. That is the eyelid that holds in the eyeball. So I want to make sure that I draw that in because that's really going to help this eyeball look more three-dimensional. Okay, there it is. Cool. Now we've got the top of the eyelid. This is the crease where that skin is actually folding over the eyeball and back into the eye socket. All right, so that's that opening in the skull between where the eyeball sits and the brow bone. So the skin is actually kind of folding back into that socket. We're going to draw that opening. So I'm starting near the corner here. It comes up. Look at the distance here. Kind of flattens. and then it comes down. And this one actually has a little fold in the skin here. So it's going to start real close. It comes up. Oh, look at it. It's following that eyeball because it's going up and around that eyeball into the eye socket and coming back down. Mine might be a little bit big. Bring it down just a little bit. But it's following that shape of the eyeball. Okay. Awesome. So we're kind of getting closer now. We're going to be drawing in the iris and the pupil here. And so the iris is a complete circle. It kind of comes up into this area. Our top eyelid is covering it. Again, this is easiest if we just go ahead and draw the whole circle instead of just drawing part of it. So if it's easier for you, I can see where the iris comes to. It's almost right to the edge here. It looks like it's about here and about here. So that's about how big I need to make the iris. Remember, we've done this in other drawings where we kind of mark out where things are, how big they need to be, and then it's just easier for us to kind of connect those dots. So I'm going to draw the whole circle in. And I'm going to kind of work on it to make it more circular, if that makes sense. You can go ahead and erase this top part because we're not going to see that part. Okay. Still not super happy with this shape. All right, I think that's a little bit better. Worked on it a little bit to get it a little bit more round. Cool, and then we're going to be drawing the pupil here, and that is in the middle. My middle line is still here. All right, cool. Got the pupil in. Awesome. In fact, I can probably make it just a little bit bigger. All right, good. So we're looking good so far. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to, we can start shading. We can get rid of some of our extra lines that we are not using. So the circle part that was down here, I can kind of erase my other circle lines that are here, my center line. And you might want to lighten up some of these lines. And we can start shading. So when I'm drawing the eye, I kind of like to start with the darkest areas. For me, it just works to kind of get things laid in. If you would like to start with the lighter areas, you're more than welcome to start with the lighter areas. I like to start with the outline around the iris. I like to start with the pupil. Don't forget there is a little reflection right here. So it's lighter right there. So you might want to even draw that in like, hey, don't shade this in crazy dark right here. I do like to start with the darker lines around the eyelids. So this bottom section does have a slightly darker line. Right in here is darker, and then all the way until it almost touches the iris is darker. This is much lighter here, so I'm going to leave that alone. So I can go ahead and get some of that in. This is just going to help define that separation between the eyelid and the eye. This is that line quality that we learned about in first semester. I'm going to use darker, thicker lines to show where there is more shadow, more depth. And thinner lines where it's lighter and maybe there's not as much contrast in that depth. Okay, cool. So just really basic beginning right there. I can do the same thing with this eyelid. It's pretty dark. It's pretty thick line because there's a lot of shadow. It does get lighter as it comes out over here. That one's still pretty dark. But I'm using that line quality to kind of show some more definition. All right, Cool. We're ready to start shading. So I'm going to go around the iris. I'm going to go really careful to try to get this as round as I can. If you need to pick up your pencil and move your hand so you can make it more round, do so. You want to draw so that your hand is naturally making things round. So if it feels uncomfortable, you need to move your hand. Don't try to draw in a restrictive space because you're not going to like the lines that you come up with. Going around the pupil, I can go ahead and shade in the pupil. It is very dark. I'm still using my lightest pencil. I will go back over the dark areas with a darker pencil in another layer. Right now, I just want to start with my lighter layer. Now, this little catch light right here, this little reflection, it is not white. So I do want to shade it in something, but it's not white. All right, so I got a good start. Around the edge of the iris, it is darker, and it's not like a smooth dark. It's kind of textured. It comes into the eye a little bit. So I'm going to just start by giving this a thicker outline. Just for the start of this. And I'm really only going to go over drawing one eye with you. Once you kind of have the basics of how to do this, I'm going to let you fill in the other two eyes on this practice sheet on your own. But just for starting out, I want to go over the structure and how to draw one of these eyes. Okay, and I'm also going to do the same thing right here, even though this is not the edge of the iris, and it's a little lighter here, it's a little darker here. The eyelid has a thickness to it, and it is sitting on top of the eyeball, so it is creating a shadow on the top of the eyeball. So there is a shadow that runs along the whole top here. So it's thin on this side, and it's thicker over here. And there's a little bit of a shadow that runs along this whole thing, so I'm going to go ahead and add that shadow in. Okay. So you're probably like, Furton, that's really dark. The white of the eye is white. If we look at this reference image here, none of this white of the eye is actually white. This reflection that's on the iris, the colored part, is actually much brighter than the white of the eye. The white of the eye, even though it is white, it still has some pigments to it. It's got a yellowish cast to it. It's got little red bits in it. It's got shadows because it is round and it's sitting inside of your head. Look how dark this part is over here. So we are going to be shading in the white of the eye, even though it's not really white. All right, I am going to start by adding in some values on the iris. I'm going to do the eyelashes later, and I will show you that after I get the rest of this done. Remember, our erasers can be really good drawing tools, so I'm going to make sure that I use that. I am going to take this little piece right here that's kind of like a triangle. I'm going to kind of map that out. I'm going to try to leave that space alone because that space is like the brightest white. So I'm going to try to leave that alone. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over a light value on the eye to kind of give it a base value so I can get started. I want this to be as smooth as I can get it because I'm going to be creating lines in different directions here shortly. You know what? I think I'm actually going to extend this up to this whole area before I get too far. We can always draw those eyelashes in. So this is kind of a slanted rectangular shape right there. Okay. So the iris is a little bit lighter in the middle. It's a little bit darker here. It gets a little bit light before it hits this dark outline. So I can just kind of go in with another layer and start adding in these directional lines. Kind of like making a flower. This is going to start giving me the texture of the iris. I'm just doing this really light to just get a texture in there. Okay, so now it's getting a little bit closer. It's darker up here, so I'm going to go ahead and make this part darker. Okay, I do see some darker lines coming off the pupil, so I'm going to go ahead and add those in. This is not a smooth texture here, so I'm going to go ahead and add in this texture. Making sure I'm keeping my lines pointed at the pupil. Okay, and in the middle here, it's a little bit darker, but it's not like consistently dark. So it's darker here, there's a light spot. It's darker here, there's a light spot. It's darker. So if I want to make a realistic looking eye, I want to make sure that I kind of follow that pattern, because eyes are not super flat and consistent. I guess that's the word that I'm looking for. There's different variations to them. So I want to make sure that I'm kind of keeping that in there to make this eye look more realistic. Okay, so there we go so far. I think that's pretty good right now. This looks dark because this is all bright white. We haven't added any more shading to this. We might need to darken this up a little bit depending on how we do with the shadows here. So I'm going to start adding in these shadows. So I'm going to add in near the tear duct. Look how dark the shadow is. The eye is receding back into the eye socket. We've got the tear duct muscle here, but this is going pretty far back in space. So I want to make sure that I'm including all of this. And you know what? I'm realizing this line is way too close. It's okay, I can fix it. Should be back here. That looks better. All right, so lots of shadow in here. And I want this to look smooth. It is on the eyeball. It is something that is a smooth thing. So to make sure that I get it smooth. And I'm noticing that the whole thing actually has some value to it. So I'm going to go ahead and shade in the whole thing with a light value. I'm going to come back in with some more dark here, and this is just going to make the rest of it kind of pop. Look how dark I'm going with this. It's taken me a couple layers to get it where I want it also. So it is totally okay to go over it a little bit. Ooh, my eye's looking more 3D now. This isn't looking as dark as it was before, which is good. That's totally good. This looks a little weird because I haven't shaded it in yet, but this eye is definitely starting to look more three-dimensional. So I'm going to go ahead and start shading in this tear duct. There are a couple little highlights here. I can leave them out right now. I find sometimes, though, when we're trying to shade around things that we tend to draw an outline around them. The other thing I get to do is use either the white eraser or the gum eraser to kind of pick up those highlights afterwards. So I think that's what I'm going to do because I don't want it to look like it's outlined. So there is a little bump here. So this part looks lighter. This part looks darker. And I notice I've lost some definition, so I want to get this dark line back in. There we go. Get some of these shadows back in. All right, cool. So let's see what I want to use to pick up those highlights. The eraser that's in my bag has some nice sharp corners to it already, so I think I'm going to use that to pick up those highlights. You can use your kneaded eraser. So there's one highlight. If your corner is really dirty, you can just kind of wipe it off a little bit, make sure it's clean. That'll give you a nice clean highlight. All right, cool. I've picked up those highlights. Back out of here. Eyes looking pretty good. I'm going to keep going with it. There's shadow here, some shadow here, and some shadow here. This part is going back into space. Remember, the eyeball is round. It's kind of going back into the eye socket. So I do want to have a little bit of shadow. It's not very dark, but it is going to kind of help the eye look more round. So I'm using really light pressure. I'm holding the back of my pencil to try to get that light pressure in there. Get some more of that shadow. This line is a little darker, so I can go ahead and darken up just a little bit. It's not very dark like the other ones. This line is going to be darker, but it's going to be because of the eyelashes, so I'll get that in just a minute. It's pretty dark right in here. All right, cool, round looking eyeball. I'm going to go ahead and shade this part in, this shadow where the skin is folding into the eye socket. And I just noticed there's another little line there. The more detail I get in, the more realistic this is going to look. So I kind of do want to get in as much detail as I possibly can. It's just going to help your drawing look better. So yeah, this is taking a little while. I'm giving you guys a couple days to complete this worksheet because this is something that takes a while to complete. It's not something you just rush through, especially if you're trying to make it look realistic. You want to kind of take your time. Try to get as many details in as you can. All right, cool. So the other thing I noticed is that there's some shading on this part. So not only is the skin folding back into the eye socket, it's coming back out. So I want to be able to show some of that roundness. I'm going to put a little bit of shading on this side as well. That's going to show that the skin is coming back out of that eye socket. Sweet, it's coming together. All right, so there is some shading down underneath here too. This is going to show that the skin is coming back down, kind of going around the eye. This is coming up. So we're going to add in that shading as well. It is pretty light. You can always go darker. It's easier to go darker than it is to go lighter. So I'm going to start out with lighter shading. Right, I'm going to go a little bit darker over here. I'm going to darken this up a little bit too. All right, cool. Looking good. Eyelashes. So, something I want to tell you about eyelashes. Eyelashes do not, here's my really quick football eye, right? Eyelashes are coming out of the skin and around the skin, out and around. So they're not sticking up like this, just poking through our eyes. They're coming out of the skin and around, out and around, out and around. And they're skinnier at the top. So what I want to do with my pencils, I want to push and then I want to lift. And that's going to, let me see if I can zoom it in some. There we go. That's going to create a lighter end, a thicker base here, and it's going to mimic a hair a little bit better. So we're going to do some eyelashes. Eyelashes that are coming out at us are going to be really short and go right up. Eyelashes that are a little further away from us are going to come out more before they curl to the side. So think about where they're at in space. They're coming out and towards us. So let me do that one real quick. So they're coming out and towards us. So they're going to be really short at the bottom and they're going to curve up right away. And that is okay. I know it's going to look weird at first. That's fine. They come down over the iris a little bit. Remember, they take up space. Some of these out here, I'll do one of these. It's kind of like the Nike swoosh. Comes down and away. Down and away. Down and away. See how it's coming down over the eye? It's doing the same thing over here. So we're going to do a lot of them. We don't want to do them all exactly the same because these are little hairs after all. They are not little perfect going in the same direction, same length, same thickness. They kind of have a mind of their own a little bit. So we're going to start adding them in. I'm looking for the direction that they're coming, the length that they are. Some of them are crossing, they're overlapping. Here's that dark line I was talking about. See how it's naturally coming along as I'm adding more and more lashes. I'm not rushing through these lashes. I'm trying to get them in there. And look how far they extend out here. They extend pretty far. Lucky for the guys too. Guys tend to have longer lashes, like natural lashes. Not really sure why. So I don't know if this is a male or a female eye. It could be either. There's a lot of long lashes on here. Doesn't look like there's makeup clumped up at all. This for sure is a male eye, and it's got long, thick lashes too. All right, I think that's good for the top. The lashes on the bottom, they're really, really tiny on the inside of the eye. They're a little longer on the outside. There's not as many as the top. And so we're going to draw them lighter. And they're coming out and down. These are coming out and up. These are coming out and down. So we've got some tiny ones in here. And they're following along that line, that edge of the thickness of the eyelid. So they're not coming right out of the eyeball, but this other line here instead that shows the thickness of the eyelid. So some of these are longer, some of them are short, some of them cross over. All right, I think I'm pretty happy with that. So, ta-da! We have made an eye. Yes, this is a long video. It took that long to get through doing this. The more you practice, the quicker this is going to be. This took longer because I was explaining things. Oh, look what I forgot. The reflection of the eyelashes. Let's get those in really quick. So this line comes down a little further here. We're going to do the opposite of our eyelashes here. We're going to curl them down and in. These are pretty dark lines. Let's get that in. There we go. There's our reflection. All right, cool. So you can go back in here with your darker pencils and darken some things up. There are some things that can get a little darker just to kind of give it a little bit more depth. The more detail you add, the more realistic it's going to look. I want you to try your best with this. I realize that you guys are not professional artists, and I'm not looking for that. I'm looking to see the things that I've taught here, that you're trying them out, and that you're trying to learn how to build an eye. This is going to make our portraits look that much more realistic. Let me know if you need help. Otherwise, have fun with this.